So with managing English with your other subjects, I think it's important to sort of disperse your English study out amongst everything else. So not doing it in super big chunks, because I feel like English is a creative subject and you don't want to be doing it all at once and just sort of banging it all out. So I feel like dispersing it across like a whole week and stuff like that, and not doing it all at once. But also remembering that English is the only compulsory subject. So there are the most people doing English in the state, and it is sort of the most competitive subject. So you may have to spend a tiny bit of extra time doing English. I know I did, but that still doesn't mean, you know, you have to do more English than every other subject, but just maybe doing a little bit more in class, and maybe staying back and asking your teacher a few questions and just things like that. Class attendance is very important. Even missing one class, like you come back to class and you'd miss this stuff, and for me it was so overwhelming. So I think definitely try to attend every class that you can, because you never know, like that might be the day that your teacher introduces a new text, or that might be like the day that you start analysing Shakespeare. So it's the stuff in class is stuff you can't do by yourself, because you need that peer discussion and you need your teacher's advice. So go to class. So before you go into the exam, I think the best way to prepare is to do like quite a few practice questions, so that when you actually get in, you're not used to the pressure. And also when you do the exams, make sure that you do the essays both in paper 1 and in paper 2, and the comprehension in order of the way they structure it, because it's sort of structured for a reason, and that way you don't have to be like confusing yourself about timing or anything. So in class, it's really important that you ask your teacher as many questions as you can in class. I know personally, I harass my teacher in class, and whilst it feels like you're being annoying, it's actually the best time to ask questions and get as much information out of them as you can, because that way you're not going home and like wondering about things, and you can be like really certain and get all the information that you need. I tended to handwrite most of my notes, because that way that like sort of handwriting things and muscle memory, it helps you to remember it better, and that way you're not sort of like distracted by a computer as well, and you can stop and look up, and I feel like it helps you be more engaged if you handwrite. Yeah, definitely. I thought it was really, really useful to participate in class discussions, because it's so interesting to hear what other people have to say. And people may have read the text and have a different perspective to you, and that can be something that can be really useful when it comes to writing your essay, because you have a range of different perspectives. With Google Classroom, you can actually download the Google Classroom app, and it gives you little updates when your teacher adds something to Google Classroom. So I did that so I didn't miss anything. And with the resource book was so helpful. The thing that I think a lot of people skip over is the critical readings. Make sure you read the critical readings, because not everyone does, and it gives you a little bit of an advantage. And reading them also helps you understand the text a lot better, and it gives you little bits and pieces that you can actually use in your essay. So I would say definitely read the critical readings. The way I engaged with my prescribed text was, again, reading the critical readings, because it gives you a bit of a background to the text, and it tells you all about the context. And if you understand the context of a text, it really helps you understand like where the author is actually coming from, and that way you can sort of appreciate their work better. And it's a lot less difficult to analyse when you know their background and the background of the time, I think. Study kind of for English came in like a few steps for me. The first step was definitely just getting your essay done, and like solidifying your essay and making sure that it's perfect and your teacher's read over it and everything like that. And then the next step would be definitely writing it down on palm cards, and just writing the important bits down on the palm cards and getting rid of the fluff that you won't need to remember word for word. And then after that, writing it down from the palm cards, doing like time practices, and then the final step would be doing practice questions without looking at the palm cards. That was what I did for English. So the feedback from my teachers, specifically after trials, was super important because it like showed me where I went wrong, and it was great because it sort of helped me to make sure that I wouldn't do it again in the future. So the way that I implemented it was just like went over my trial exams with my teachers, and for English went over my essays with my teacher, and then went home and sort of implemented everything that she had said to me, and just tweaked little bits. And I also like to show my friends my essays. We like sort of all showed each other our essays, because sometimes when you're reading and like writing something so many times, you like miss certain bits, and there's certain phrases that seem like there's nothing wrong with them to you, but maybe to someone else they don't make perfect sense. So I think that's a great way of making sure that your essay is really lexically dense and every phrase makes sense as well. For time and task management for English, my maths teacher had a really good saying. She said, to start is half the job complete, and I think that's so true, especially for English. English can be kind of tricky sometimes because you're still analysing a text in class, especially for assessments. You're still analysing a text in class and you can't always go straight into writing an essay because you've not finished it. But what you can do is go through your resource and get all of the information you can, so that when it comes time to actually getting into the essay and you've finished analysing it in class, you can go straight into writing it. So definitely get on top of it by using your resource as much as you can. The way that I did it was I would like read through a text, and then sort of like an alarm table, I would sort of set up like a theme table. So I would do one column was like the theme, and then the next column I'd do the context, the next column I'd do the evidence, and then the next column I'd do the analysis, and then the final column I would do like the link to the question. So sort of setting it up in a table that works for you. Like it doesn't have to be like that, but just any sort of table so that's not like a jumble of information. And I think splitting evidence up in terms of themes is really important, because then it helps you just go straight into like separating paragraphs. So definitely doing tables before you get into writing the essay. So you can do that like whilst you're reading the text, and after you're reading the text you can just go and put stuff into a table. Well, for comprehension, I just did like heaps and heaps of comprehension practice. So if you go onto the NESA website, they have all of the past papers and you can do all of the comprehension there. And also if you ask your teachers, they will have comprehension practice. So just do as much as you can for that. And sort of practice using the structure. I would always think if it was 5 marks, okay, I'm going to do a topic sentence, just one topic sentence, and then 4 to 5 pieces of evidence depending on how much time. And another tip for comprehension is if you can use one of the words in the rubric, so for human experience, I think there's like paradox, anomaly, inconsistency, those words, if you can slot one of those words into your topic sentence, then that's just going to give you an immediate advantage. And then for crafted writing was a tricky one because it was the first year that it had been done. But the way that I prepared for it was to have sort of one of the 3, like all 3 texts ready to go for the HSC. So a discursive text, a persuasive text, and a creative text, to have something like that. And to have them all sort of be based off the same subject is a good idea as well, because then they're sort of interchangeable and you don't have to remember as much content. But definitely sort of having a draft of each so that you can go into the exam, and doing practice ones as well, because it's hard to adapt like a draft that you've written to like every different question. So if you can practice as much as you can, then I think that's the best way to prepare for that. So 1984, it's a big book and there's a lot. It's not a big book, but it's a dense book and there's a lot in there. So I think the best way to do it is to split up your ideas into themes, because looking back on the question that we got in the HSC, it was very theme based. I don't know if that's how it's going to be in the future, but like I have a feeling that that's the way that they're moving forward. So I think really understanding 1984 in terms of the themes that are in it is going to be the best way to approach it, because then you can structure your paragraphs based on themes. And if you go into the exam, you know, having a few stock paragraphs based on themes, I think you'll be able to adapt them to the question. Textual conversations was tricky. I think it was the module that I struggled the most with. The the way that I structured it, it's when you're studying two texts, it can be really daunting to write an essay because it's hard to like synthesize and it's hard to talk about two texts in one essay. The way I actually did it was I did only 3 body paragraphs, and I did sort of one for the first text. The next body paragraph was about the second text, and then the third one was synthesized. So they were both in the third one. I think if you can prepare an essay when it's like that, it's not overwhelming because you haven't got all these different paragraphs. And just make sure that the evidence is broad enough for you to be able to adapt it to the themes. And using the rubric as well will give you clues as to what the question will be like. So if your paragraphs apply to most of the words in the rubric, then you should be fine. Oh, they were so helpful because whilst assessment tasks don't seem like they are super important, it is like a good idea to just try as hard as you can because you can then use that work for your trials. The essay that I did for 1984 in like term 4 of year 11 was basically the essay that I used for my HSC. So if you can really try as hard as you can in the assessments, you can use that material in the HSC and the trials, and it makes the workload not as overwhelming because you've already got stuff you can work off. So I think it's really important to try really hard and, you know, not have to start from the beginning all over again when you approach trials and HSC. King Henry IV Part 1, Shakespeare is always really tricky because like I find it hard to even understand the language. I think what helped me the most was reading the critical reading because all of those critical readings, they're from an expert's point of view. So they have a lot of really like sort of helpful insights into Shakespeare. So I think definitely reading the critical readings for those before you start trying to analyse the text. Also, when you analyse the text in class, I think that's a great time to really make sure you're paying attention because like if your teacher can help you understand it as much as you can, then that's a win. And then for writing an essay, I think the content is so hard. I find Shakespeare so hard. The content is already really difficult, so keep the structure really simple. So I think just following the structure that your teachers give you for essays for something like Shakespeare is a really good idea because then you don't get overwhelmed. And yeah, like keeping your topic sentences relatively simple because the evidence and the quotes are going to be tricky to analyse. So keep the rest relatively simple. I think I kind of did a lot of experimenting in terms of which space worked the best for me for studying. The library is really great when it's quiet. I definitely did a lot of studying in the seminar rooms in the library. Personally for me, studying at home didn't really work because I would get so distracted. So I think studying in the school library during the afternoons is a great idea. And then going to the library, a library that's, you know, not the school library, but I went to Manly Library. I thought that library was great. On the weekends with your friends, because when your friends are there, it doesn't seem so unenjoyable, and you know, you can go and get a coffee, you can go and get lunch, and you're there to motivate each other. So I think definitely studying with your friends on the weekend is a great idea, but then maybe studying by yourself in the school library in the afternoons is helpful too, because it gives you time to just sort of think about like what you've learned that day and like really solidify everything as well. Good luck coming out of the HSC. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. If you just stay on top of things and start assessments early and start your studying as early as you can, you'll be fine.